So this is a small reflection on game design. So the thing that I've been thinking about is that I've been taught a year's worth of game design courses or game analysis courses, and I've noticed one thing has been really missing. Well, actually, two things. And the first one that has been really missing is that a lot of game design that I got was mostly about how to create good games. Interestingly enough, this did not imply that I would learn how to create successful commercial games. And in some cases, you don't, right? Because in some cases, you need to create a game for revalidation. So like, I don't know, there's this person, and this person is something with this arm, and well, they need to revalidate the arm. You create a game for that. In other cases, gaming could be used for education. In other cases, it could be used for political propaganda, perhaps. And in those cases, you don't always need to have a commercial successful game. But what I did notice is that commercial successful games, they are the games that have the motivational pull, right? People are motivated to play them. And in my courses, I would always get the ideas about being given ideas from the teachers about that games have a motivational pull and people want to play them. But I believe this is mainly the case with games that are commercially successful. Uh, in other words, most games they're not that motivational. Actually, they don't have this motivational pull, which is probably at the very least 95% of all the games. There are only a few games that are really uh, well played by many people. Um, Even if you look at all the genres, right? Like all the casual games, all the hardcore games, all the well, whatever. Um, so how do you design those games? Because academically, I have not seen a game design method that fully focuses on this. There is one that hinges on it. It's called the MDA model by Unique LeBlanc and Subek. Which MDA stands for mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics. But for example, Hunica, I thought her name was Robin. She created the game Journey. She was, I thought, an executive producer on the game. And well, Journey is a commercial successful game, and also LeBlanc created a game that has been reviewed as well. It's not really a good game to play, but the game is really well balanced and it's designed really well. It's just not my thing, and that's actually a good game as well. But other than that, the game design literature that I've been reading academically at least is yeah, it's pretty more bent on the focusing on the idea of creating good games, but without the commercial perspective. And in some cases, this is the right thing to do, because in some cases, games get commercially successful because some famous person just is like, hey, I like this game, or hey, even some in PewDiePie's case one time with Flappy Bird, like, hey, I hate this game, and people will still play it. But when you look at Angry Birds, for example, I mean, when you like, I read the blogs, many blogs, telling that Rovio games, it was the 52nd game that they created, and before that they had no commercial success. Also with I forgot the company's name, but Fruit Ninja, right? The company in question. Well, they also created a lot of games for uh, other organizations, mainly commercial organizations that wanted the game to promote it. So, for example, I don't know, probably not this one, but Disney, and they wanted to have a game for their films. Wasn't Disney, but something like that, right? And they started to create their own IP, but Fruit Ninja wasn't the first game. And one teacher actually told me in an off-comment conversation in a bar where I was sitting with him, one professor, he said, well, if you want to create commercially successful games, the best method is to do something that sticks. And the best way to do that is to just make 50 things and just see throw them all in the water and then just see which one doesn't sink. That was the metaphor he gave me. And when I think about that, I'm just kind of flabbergasted because then I'm thinking, well, is game design worthless then, from a commercial standpoint at the very least? I mean, with regards to games teaching you something or games for health, the game design is definitely not worthless because you have a lot more requirements. But with regards to commercial games, right? Is it worthless? I don't know. I don't know. And what also struck me is that, and that's the second thing, and people academically also do talk a little bit more about this in the field that in the game studies field, but still not that much. So here's the thing. I know two big game design movements in the academic community. The first one focuses a lot more on the mechanics of game mechanics. Some mechanics you can see them like even like mechanics in everyday life, right? Like if you create something, they have a mechanical system, and that produces a certain outcome. And the outcome it produces is always also always the mix between how the mechanics work and how the person interfacing with it experiences them. So, for example, a watch, right? You have a watch. It's not a game, but you have a watch. Well, you have the mechanics of the watch, how the clock works, how the time ticks. And then when a person looks at the time, reads the time, this person gets what time it is, which is called a dynamic, and then gets an emotional experience about it. So, for example, if the person is late, he or she will feel rushed. This is the same with games, right? You have I don't know, Mario, for example. So the time going down, that's definitely a mechanic. You noticing that the time goes down is a dynamic. You having an emotional experience about it is what they call an aesthetic. So, but game dynamics, not the other two dynamics, aesthetics not, but game dynamics, game mechanics are what people focus a lot on. Then there are also game design patterns. I thought this was from the person, one of them that researches this is called a Björkfist, something like that. Well, it's some Swedish Nordish name anyway. And game design patterns, they're a lot more like, oh gee, gamers will know. I'm not a hardcore gamer anymore for a couple of years now. But game design patterns are like, so let me think of a so spawning a character. So that's spawning is a game design pattern because it's so much used that you just instantly know. Oh yeah, I get it, I get it. Or um, basically anything that's common practice with how you get loot or the whole idea of loot, right? That's also a simple game design pattern. Let me think of one more. Uh, yeah, so the crosshairs. Basically many standard practices in certain game genres. You can see them as game design patterns. But when I looked at how Fruit Ninja, for example, was created, um, it was created by a metaphor. And this is interesting because game studies doesn't really look at this, but there's this other academic field called human computer interaction which does, like because the desktop computer now I mean the desktop interface is a prime example of a metaphor, and many things on the world wide web or the internet, whatever you want to call it, they are a metaphor. The word web is even a metaphor, like a web of interlinked things. So they have been looking at this, and I noticed that yeah, many, not all, definitely not all commercial successful games, but a sizable amount of commercial successful games, they have been designed at least in part by a metaphor. So Fruit Ninja is one. The metaphor was like a literal copy of what they were doing, like throwing tomatoes at a knife because the CEO or some person high up in that company bought a new knife set, and a friend was throwing tomatoes at it, and he was slashing it down. Um, So yeah, Flappy Bird as well, for example. Flappy Bird. I mean, clear metaphor. Like, uh, you have a bird, and if a bird falls hard to the ground, it will die. I mean, it's you don't want to die. I mean, it's quite clear. It's not There's not nothing abstract. Or all soccer games or all fighting games. Most shooter games, not all, maybe not all. Well, maybe all in have a partial metaphor, but most shooter games are fully copied from real life. So you have this copying thing, and sometimes this more metaphorical thing. And with metaphor, I just basically mean not the normal way, the normal definition, I guess, but more the you take something from real life and you just digitize it. So take whatever you have from real life, put it in a game, and then you got yourself a game. And it's really a quick way of doing it as well. But in the whole year that I've been learning my program, I haven't been taught this. So yeah, those were two things that were just like bothering me a little bit. It's like, I want to know more about it as a as a game design student. Cheers.